Thank you all for joining us for this conversation about the Rio Grande Valley and its identity in the past and the present and what we see in the future. Before we start with our conversation, I think it will make sense to go around the table and introduce ourselves. So, ladies first.
Hi, I'm Rose Benavides. I am the president of the Starr County Industrial Foundation and also the board chair for South Texas College Board of Trustees.
Hi, I'm Radel Garza. I'm the CEO for Harlingen Economic Development Corporation.
Good morning. It's good to be here with you guys. My name is Manny Vela. I'm the CEO for Valley Baptist Health System and Valley Baptist Medical Center in Harlingen. Coming up on September 1st is my 19th year anniversary with Valley Baptist. Couldn't be more honored to be there.
Awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm the new McAllen Chamber President and CEO. Happy to be here with everybody.
Thank you. And my name is Matt Roszczak. I'm the Vice President of Economic Development at COSTEP, get to work in regional economic development in the Rio Grande Valley and beyond. And once again, I appreciate you all being here for this conversation. We're going to be talking about the identity of the Rio Grande Valley and the events and developments that shaped that identity. Looking at the past, at the present, at the future of the region. So in terms of the past, roughly looking at a time frame from late 1980s, early 1990s to 2005, the major growth period in our region. Then 2005 to 2020, kind of those events are shaping what we're seeing in the Rio Grande Valley today. And then looking at 2021, moving forward, what do we see as the identity of the region? How it will evolve? Obviously, it's been, we look back to the late 80s to 2021 beyond. There's been tremendous evolutions and transformations of this region, and that's what we're here to talk about today. All of y'all have been part of this transformation, part of these times, part of these changes, and I would love to hear y'all's insight on that. So once again, I'd like to start on my right with ladies first. Ms. Rose, what do you think are some, looking over past, present, and the future, what do you think some of those defining moments for the region?
So if we're going to talk chronologically, from my perspective, and I'm not biased at all, but having South Texas College be developed in this region absolutely transformed the opportunity that was available. And I mean, I think we're not economists per se, but the work we do is directly related to impacting the economic success of this region. And so when you have now an opportunity after being the only region that didn't have access to higher education, it changes the dynamic. And I'll give you an example. When you look at unemployment back in the 1993, when the college was founded, it was over 50% in Starr County alone, close to that in Hidalgo County. Fast forward, you've seen that reduce 75%. We're single and very low double digits in the area now. And so I think if we had to point, in my perspective, to one thing that absolutely began the transformation of this region, it was the access to education.
What I love seeing here in the Valley now is if you go back chronologically, you can start with Pan American, you can go back to Texas Southmost in Brownsville, then UTB in Brownsville, South Texas College, Texas A&M has a new presence in the Valley. I don't look at these opportunities as competition. I look at it as layers of opportunity for our folks here in the Rio Grande Valley, Rose, and I think you're absolutely right. There's no doubt that the opportunity to access this higher education has absolutely been transformative, and we can't leave out TSDC because the concept of college ready and workforce ready it's an incredible premise to start with here in the Rio Grande Valley right now, because that's just the reality is not everybody's going to be able to go to college or want to go to college. So they have opportunities all across the board right now, and Raudel will tell you from an economic development perspective, companies who are coming down here, they're going to look for that, they're going to look for good health care, all of those kind of good things, and good restaurants as well, by the way. But they start with the foundation, and it's educational opportunities. I can tell y'all, when we're recruiting doctors, that's the first thing a doctor and their spouse ask about is talk to me about the educational opportunities. And it starts with primary education, but now it goes all the way with UTRGV and Texas Southmost, and South Texas College, Texas Southmost, et cetera. So it's a great position for us to be in right now.
Yeah, if you're looking at the regional economy and how it started, in the 80s and then back into the 90s and now to where we are today, you start looking at, what were most people doing in the Valley in the 1980s? A lot of it was agricultural-based products. I mean, whether we were growing raw materials, raw products, and then shipping them out, or even some of them being locally processed, that's a lot of what we were doing. Some of it was also in the shrimping business. The shrimping business was huge here. And so there was a lot of people in Harlingen and Brownsville that were doing shrimping, packaging, and delivering into the global markets. So the Valley has evolved from a very strong agricultural base, which is still very dominant, but it has changed into something different. And one of the things that made it change was NAFTA in 1990. So in 1990, NAFTA opened the doors for trade with Mexico, and a lot of US-based companies started moving into Mexico along the border. And some of the local communities really took advantage of that, and you started seeing that industrial sector beginning to grow and blossom. The logistics sector continued to blossom also, because now we weren't just shipping fruits and vegetables. Now we were shipping finished goods back and forth, and supplies going back into Mexico. So that's a lot of what really started getting people to look at us differently. Beyond that, we've always had this tourism aspect to the Rio Grande Valley. We have some natural resources that people love, and people love to come down and see. But we started growing the hospitality industry, and so more hotels, and then more things happening at South Padre Island. And before you knew it, South Padre Island had a whole row of tall skyscrapers, out there where people were living and spending their money. So that changed the dynamics of, the property tax base in Cameron County as well, significantly. So that's kind of what I saw as a young man 30 years ago. And, so it's changed since then, but I guess we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good point to kind of get into that conversation of what's been the momentum since, those early stages, the NAFTA, the education development, the manufacturing inclusion, more recent investments from out of the area that came to the area. What is shaping the present in the region right now?
I think you have to highlight I-69 and the value and importance of the completion of I-69, and they're getting close. You go up and down 77 right now, and they've gone around some of these little communities, and I hate to see that happen, but from a transportation perspective, it's required because it's an interstate, and at some point we got to talk about SpaceX, right? Because when you start talking about property values and appreciated property values, that's had a big impact as well. And I don't know if it's the same here in McAllen as it is in Cameron County, but it's a marked difference in Cameron County. Right
Yeah,
now.
there's some new data that's come out of the Texas Realtor Association that can prove that. So just for a little bit more context, I came from the Brownsville Economic Development side before coming into the McAllen Chamber. So we got to see a lot of that, but I think the connectivity after all these great events happened in the Rio Grande Valley just started providing or accelerating much more opportunities that we're seeing now. So I think SpaceX, seeing the interchange of human capital, trade, economy going from both countries, as well as the geographic advantages that we have. I think that's one of the main reasons why SpaceX is here too. So their impact is now being seen region-wide.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard for us to compartmentalize the past, the present, and the future because they're so intertwined. We look at it, and Radel was probably very eloquently pointed to the fact that we were laying these foundations, some of them inadvertently, but they worked. And so now what we're looking at is two things. You don't want to repeat history that was unsuccessful, but you get an idea of how you can tweak that in order for it to work for you. And so when we were talking about NAFTA, there's a lot of talk about this renegotiation of NAFTA, but really it was a better NAFTA, but it's still just NAFTA, right? Whether it's NAFTA or USMCA, we'll call it USMCA.
It's a rebrand, yeah.
Right, it's a rebrand. And that's great, but what we look at now is an opportunity to bring some of these companies offshore and attract them to an area that typically, 10, 20 years ago, you wouldn't even be thinking of them considering this as a region for them to not just have their production, but also have the labor workforce that they needed, and also find geographically and logistically the means and opportunities to make their business successful and get the return on investment that they wanted. And so when we're looking at where we're moving for development. Our recruitment goes all over the place in this region, because some of us are still playing catch up with retail and commercial, but now we're experiencing this uptick with renewable energy that is also relatively new, but is leaving a lasting mark on the property value and the tax base for our communities. Which is now trickling into data centers that are looking at our region to locate, to have cryptocurrency mining happening in this area, because they can rely on the solar and renewable energy projects as a way for backup. And so it's been a progression, but I think the important thing is potentially you've had individuals in that progression that have been able to take advantage of what the positive side of that change would mean and how you can do it better.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great point. I'd love to steer the conversation in that direction. The progressions, right? How things are building upon each other, and how interesting factors bear fruit later. The green energy transition between solar and particularly wind in this region, right? So the reason why they're here is our geography. Right, it was an economic play, but now it's providing a basis for new investment who is actually looking for that power source. And so, particularly if we look at the folks here that are working in economic development fields, what are some of these transformation of companies? And also what you're mentioning in terms of recruiting talent. You're recruiting specialties to this area that haven't been here before. And how is that dynamic changing?
Well, we have had, for example, let's talk about aerospace a little bit. We've had an aerospace presence in Harlingen for over 30 years, but it was small. It was one company. And now if you look at, the composition of aerospace industry sector workers in Cameron County, it's huge. And ULA is now a smaller part of that equation because SpaceX has really kind of ramped up in terms of its manufacturing. But what are they doing? They're doing the same kind of things that we've been doing over the last 20 years in terms of metal fabrication, welding, assembly work, that type of thing. But it's been a progression in the terms of the skills necessary. And SDC, TSDC, all those schools have been a part of upgrading that workforce so that workforce can handle that type of new task. But that's just one industry. If you start looking at, the corporate world in terms of back office operations, we had call centers here for the last 30 years. But the call centers back then were the ones that were calling out and bugging people to buy or sell something or collecting something, and people hated that. And the companies that came in were taking advantage and actually exploiting our labor force because one, we were bilingual and we still are, but two, we were cheap. We were inexpensive option for them. And we still are compared to a lot of parts of the country and a lot of parts of the world to a certain degree, but you can see a very rapid progression in terms of wages, in terms of skill sets necessary for most of the BPOs that are now working in the Valley. And so you're seeing that evolution. And eventually what we're going to be seeing is people working in an office setting and earning six figures and really contributing to the local economy more than they have in the past. And you're going to see a requirement that those folks be more technically skilled, whether it be at a 2-year school or at a 4-year university. But there's going to be those requirements because most of those jobs right now are in the bigger cities, but we're becoming a bigger city ourselves in terms of a large metro area. So you keep looking at every industry and we are evolving into something a lot better than what we were in the past. And it's really exciting to see.
Rodell, I look at that as the creation of synergies, right? Because you can talk about the direct impact from SpaceX, let's say, in the 1,500, maybe even closer to 2,000 employees they have, and they're good, high-paying jobs. But when you start going out peripherally and understand the impact that they have on our economy, they go out to eat, they're buying homes, they're seeking healthcare services, right? It's just a ripple effect, and quite honestly, in the healthcare industry, it's the same way. We're probably one of the largest private employers in the Valley, healthcare systems, right? Yeah, and so the same concept, we bring these folks in, they're to a large degree good paying jobs, and I just love the synergy we're creating in the entire Valley right now. The other thing I hope we're seeing is a collaboration of all 4 counties down here. instead of the old Friday night mentality that had stymied us for quite some time, right? Politically and otherwise. I like to think that we're getting beyond that. We're not completely beyond that now. But I'd like to think that the folks in our communities understand that if we work together, we're much stronger as a region. Now, the flip side of that is we're a hidden gem down here. And that's the way I describe us to folks that are coming down here and have an interest in the Valley. I was born at my hospital in Harlingen. This is my community. My mom was born in Donna, raised in Port Isabel. And I was going to talk about remembering going over the 2-lane causeway to Port Isabel growing up, right? But the reality, it's always been a gem. And now you see it growing, and I want to see us continue to grow. I love to see the economic development. I love to see the educational opportunities and the things that are happening over here in Hidalgo County as well, right? But I do like the thought of higher levels of collaboration amongst the region, because to some degree, that's how we can promote ourselves the best as a region.
And the catalysts now are education, for one. You know, the merger of UT Brownsville and UT Pan Am into, and the RAC in Harlingen into now a regional university, that has changed a lot. And you know, it's only been what, 5 years, something like that. You know, so but in those short 5 years, UTRGV has made a very big impact, not only in the local region, but at the state and national level as well. And that is something that is being noted by others. And so that's part of the evolution, is making sure that we have those higher level educational institutions that are going to continue to train the future workforce. You know, we're seeing now in the engineering department a lot more programs that are opening up, and a lot of them related to aerospace and into the into advanced manufacturing, you know, into you know, things that we know is what is we're going to have to compete in. You know, people talk about Industry 4.0. Hey, we're there. You know, STC has a program that is addressing that directly, and TSTC has programs to address that as well and get the labor force ready. Cybersecurity, another thing that people are looking at. And I mean, that's starting now in the grade school levels, you know, where kids are learning to code, and it's really exciting to watch that too. But we still have a long ways to go.
And I think the beautiful thing here is that we have this opportunity for growth, right? That runway is still very, very long, and we have a lot of momentum moving forward. You know, touching on that regional aspect, you know, it's interesting because, you know, you're a Hidalgo County guy that came to Cameron County, right? You're a Cameron County guy that came to Hidalgo County. You got a Stark County with a significant impact in Hidalgo, and while you may have stayed in Cameron the whole time, I get to make up for it. Yeah, well, the family came. Yeah.
Grandparents came into Hidalgo County.
Well, there you go.
He was closer to Stark County.
Yeah, so Stark County, correct. And you know, exactly. You know, and I came from a county 8,000 miles that way, you know, to be down here. And actually, you know, doing regional economic development, not just the valley, but the mirror side on the Mexican side, even extending this the entire all fingers of I-69 out into the Laredo area, and the mirror image of that. And so, you know, as you talked about, you know, kind of that runway and the development, the growth that we're going, you know, Josh, you've been, when you know, your Cameron County, your Brownsville days, you know, you're instrumental in helping pave some of that runway into the future. You know, what do you see there?
Well, what I was seeing there, I truly saw throughout the entire Rio Grande Valley. You know, as a side effect of all these great economic developments that have happened throughout the years in the Rio Grande Valley, I saw a lot of potential in the human capital that we were seeing, not just what was homegrown, and we see that here in this table, right? But also the folks that are now deciding to come to the Rio Grande Valley. What avenues do they have to be able to capitalize on the opportunities that we were fostering? So one of the things that myself and the team were able to develop in my time in Brownsville, and it's something that should be a regional effort, something that we are going to implement here in McAllen, is to be able to push entrepreneurship-led economic development forward, right? And so, you know, you get great employers such as SpaceX, ULA, even Zoho now here in McAllen that's going to go ahead and start their operations, and that provides a lot of peripheral impact. And so what do those impacts look like? And so what we did was we focus on developing the ecosystem, the resources, the pathways, whether that's continued education, continued mentoring, financial resources, validation that encompasses everything, in order for these entrepreneurs to be able to accelerate their growth, be able to create primary jobs into the area, and hopefully, you know, foster and continue to push emerging industries in this area as well. So I think the buzz that we're generating, I wouldn't call it the growth period of the Rio Grande Valley. I would call it a growth period of the Rio Grande Valley. Yeah.
Very good point. Speaking of growth, I want to talk to you about Stark County, and I love Stark County. It puts a smile on my face every time I cross the county line. The growth that Stark County is currently experiencing because of that integration, the binational integration, right? Ruta 54 and the connection to Monterrey and how the entire ecosystem of transportation, logistics, manufacturing, everything else is really kind of starting to blend. What do you see out in Stark County and also looking into the future?
We started this journey about what our future looks like, it seemed, right before COVID hit. And so we had to take a step back and basically cater our services into survival versus strategic planning. And so we understood, and what that period of time did for us was illustrate a lot of our shortcomings, and not just for our county, but this whole region. Broadband, for example. We absolutely had a lot of work to do with that, and a lot has been done, and is being done as we speak. But I think what we saw also was still an opportunity to take some of this past agricultural land and ranch land that is suffering dramatically from this drought. The agricultural side that has found its way into Mexico to actually do the harvesting and use that land for renewable energy projects. And so we're seeing, we probably have had about $2 billion of investment in our community in the last 5 years, and the vast majority of that has been into renewable energy. And so now we're working with 3 data centers that are looking to locate in our area that will add probably about another $800 million when it's all said and done. And so we're looking at that area for the future as we're diversifying our economy, but we also know that our skills gap needs to be closed in order for us to have the necessary workforce that is doing a higher skilled work. And there is no low, I guess that's the wrong choice of words, because there is no low skilled work. Everyone's looking at salaries in every industry going up, but we understand that if we're looking at the kind of training necessary for this kind of future industry in our area, there has to be a component that is more skilled. It is an opportunity for us to do 3 things: grow the tax base for our community, which allows us to improve and expand services. It allows us to utilize some of the property that is right now being held by ranchers and agricultural past owners that is essentially not doing anything and probably costing them more money to have. And they were getting very, very good revenue from that. And thirdly, it's creating job opportunities and the ability for us to be part of this whole conversation about where technology is taking the region and taking the country. So I think as we're looking at Stark County and this whole region, the industries that are more higher skilled, that are dealing with aerospace, that are dealing with growing logistical opportunities for the import-export, which we haven't even touched on how that has changed in the last years and how it's going to continue to change. I think Stark County is, we all talk about being the best geographically located area. But what we have found is we have a location that has allowed this development to happen because much of it is still untouched. And so we have the availability of a lot of real estate that is affordable for people.
God, I'd love to hear that, Rose. And I'm sitting here thinking about Willacy County because some of those things apply to Willacy County as a rural county as well. And I'm just sort of munching on, okay, how can we take what's happening in Stark County and apply it over into Willacy County as well so they see the same type of growth and economic opportunities. The other thing I love hearing from you and the folks at this table is the flexibility that our entities and our institutions have right now to change what they offer to meet the demands of current industry and the ability to continue doing so as we move forward, right? It applies to healthcare as well, because we, like everybody else, are short on staff right now, right? So we're in constant communication with South Texas College, with TSTC, with UTRGV. Anybody who has a nursing program and or allied health program right now, we're in constant communication with. And they're always asking, okay, where are you short, right? What do we need to concentrate on? And I think if we always maintain that mentality with institutions such as yours and the other ones we've mentioned, then it puts us in a much better position to be able to meet the demand moving forward. And yet again, it has that peripheral impact
And
that
I
we
think
talk
many
about.
times we have the fault of being reactive, obviously, because it's our nature. But we've been fortunate in a lot of these sectors that all of the educational institutions have been proactive in ensuring that their training is aligned with the workforce opportunities. And I think one of the things that we're going to be seeing is probably when we're talking about the past, 50, 60 years ago, if you weren't going to college, some counselor would tell you, well, maybe you can become a welder and go work in Brownsville, right? And that was not probably the most ideal scenario, but it got you to do something. Now we have people, we can't keep demand up for people that want to be welders because they're making $100 grand, going up a couple of hours and working a few days in the oil and gas industry and in the wind and solar energy. And so we know that as time transitions, that stigma of not being a four-year grad is slowly starting to change the way this college-going culture is defined.
And we haven't even talked about the reality of just opportunities that will continue to be created, right, by our higher ed institutions and TSTC and those kind of things. But the other point too is we still have the lowest cost of living in the entire nation. Right, so when I talk about the Rio Grande Valley being a hidden gem, that's a component of that, right? Property values still, even though they appreciated so greatly across the country here recently, they're still a little bit more stable in the Rio Grande Valley than other places. Maybe not in Brownsville.
No, I was just going to add. Hey, I'm in the middle of selling my home right now, so I'm experienced.
You want it to be a seller's market.
But I would like to add to that. How long is that going to last? Because the entire valley is taking advantage of this bubble that we've always lived in, right? And things are rapidly changing.
The valley's economy always lags behind the national economy in terms
pains,
of whether it's going into a recession or coming out of a recession. Yeah. So, I mean, when everybody was hurting in, 2008, we didn't feel it until 2009, 2010. And then when they started rebounding, we were rebounding much later. COVID's a little bit different. We've rebounded a lot faster. Maybe we're learning a little bit better and we're more diversified, but we're still a little bit behind. And so we'll see some of that later on, I think.
Can I just say this, Matt, real quick? Yes, it's a point to make. Driving over here, I saw gas, unleaded, regular unleaded at $3.22. I just came from Colorado. They're paying well over $4. California's still paying $6 to $7. So sometimes that lag is good for us. Right?
Yeah, and I think we're showing those dynamics, right? The underlying foundation that we have that allows us to prosper even through adversity, or some of these still indirect relationships that we might have with a greater American system, greater Mexican system, greater North American system, allow us to buffer some of this impact. But as we talked about, things are transitioning and things are going to the future. So as we wrap up this wonderful conversation today and set the stage for future conversations, I kind of wanted to once again go around the table here and have you all say 2 or 3 words of what you think some of the defining trends and influences of the identity of this region are going to be looking in the future based upon what we discussed and what you're seeing in 2 or 3 words. Key words that we can leverage to start future conversations and dive into that a little bit deeper. Ms. Rose.
So diversification, education, and labor forces.
I agree with that. Transportation is going to be very critical, not just roadways, surface transportation, but obviously air is going to be very critical. We've got 3 airports right now that are fighting for the same batch of customers, and in the future, it's not going to be that way. How it ends up, I'm not going to try to say and try to predict, but it will be something different. It needs to be something different if we're going to grow this air service in the valley. It needs to be different. But air service is really one of the big components that drives a lot of that foreign direct investment that we're talking about. As an example, there's a company in Reynosa that is actually based in China, right? And so when the execs fly from China, they're looking for almost direct flights. I mean, there's no direct flights from overseas into the United States, into the Valley, but those connections from Dallas and Houston are very important. And so if they can get from Shanghai to Dallas and then to Harlingen or to McAllen, that makes a difference for them. And so air service is going to be very critical when we start looking at attracting some of those foreign direct companies that we really need to, because the other thing that we haven't talked about is supply chain and how we need to compress that. And that's another advantage that I know you can talk about for hours, but we won't today. But that's
I adopt all of that. And then what I would add is collaboration and communication as a region. And I'll go back to the importance of doing so across private to public industry, private to private, public to public, it doesn't matter. The reality is the way we're going to continue progressing is to understand what the needs are, understanding what the demands are, and then working together to meet those needs.
Well, connectivity for sure, not just physical connections through bridges, railways, et cetera, but I think also the digital connection. I think a lot of folks underestimate the multi-generational impact that just enhancing a bridge or enhancing a road can do to a community or region. The second one is regionalism. As mentioned, collaboration and communication is going to be key. There's a lot of blending of workforce. If there's going to be a huge project coming to Stark County, who's going to fill in those jobs? It's a regional thing, right? And then I think the last one is innovation. I think I'm a true believer that the sleeping giant that is the Rio Grande Valley is barely waking up. A lot of the nascent businesses or the businesses that have several years in operations have been very successful here have still yet to tap into that opportunity to grow and reach new markets. And so to be able to provide that economic development perspective and approach to those folks is just going to open way more doors for us here in the region.
Matt, can I add one more word? And I know we're short on time, but I think it's important. I think pride of folks who have been involved in these processes over the last decades to get us where we are and where we're going, right? To a large degree, we've been looked at as a backdoor to the United States of America. People should start looking at this as a front door. And we who are involved and engaged, and everybody who participates at every level down here in the Rio Grande Valley should take great pride in where we are and where we're going.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. My three words actually echo a lot of the things that you all have said. One is regional collaboration. And clearly looking at, just like we looked at collaboration across city limits or county lines, I think we're really also looking at collaboration even beyond just the 4-county region. Realizing that communities and regions that we considered as competitors in the past are really our partners in the future. The second one is binationalism. Back to what you just mentioned, embracing the fact that we are the front door to the United States. And transportation logistics, we are clearly the front door to the United States. And figuring out how we can do this collaboration across the river as well. Understand that we're really just one community. And back to your point, I think my third thing is global focus. We've talked about the bubble, right? The valley used to be in a bubble, or the region used to be in a bubble. And now we're starting to have really some national focus, but really I think we're going to leapfrog into having a global focus. Because once again, we are the front door to the US. The international supply chain is running through here. And some of these technologies and investment that we're making in the labor force is going to allow us to capture some of this foreign direct investment and really be transformative to the region. So with that, thank you all for the time here today. Thank you for the wonderful conversation. I look forward to doing this again.
Thank you.